Hey everyone, what's up? I guess we're doing a bottle episode. My name's Matt,
I'm Brian.
and you are listening to TV Guys, where every episode is a bottle episode. Brian, what's a bottle episode?
Bottle episode is not a description of this podcast as a whole because we've also brought in other guests.
I guess well, I mean, that's still okay. So, bottle episodes, like, they use the same sets and
Yeah.
they will still have stunt casting. Like, one of my picks is a huge actor that is brought in for this episode, but it's typically an episode that does not cost a lot of money because they
Yeah.
like reuse like the set that they always have for all the other seasons. They don't do
Yeah.
anything extra.
They usually don't bring in guest stars either. So they're using their own cast, their own main cast, who they're already paying no matter what, and their own sets, which they don't have to build, so they can make an episode for cheap. Because you don't think about it. Every time you watch a TV show, they go to a new location. They have to either go to or build that location, and then all the guest stars who aren't in the regulars, which means like if there's the theme song, if there's a theme song, they're the ones in the theme song.
Mhm.
Everybody else is paid for contracts. Oh, we're going to bring you in for this many episodes, and they have to pay them on top of that. So like the bottle episodes, like the bare bones minimum of what we're already going to have to pay for is what we got.
Yep. Yep. So, um, I, like I said, one of mine has a stunt guest in it, but bottle episode, yeah, we are going to talk about what our top bottle episodes are, and you can be the judge later on if we
Mm.
actually have. Because as we were saying, our definition, like there's some episodes. There's actually one that I've got on here that I'm like, I can't remember if they filmed it completely on this, if it actually technically counts, and I think it does, but you'll have to tell me if it doesn't or not. But
Yeah.
that's enough foreplay getting into it. There's one that I was like, I was looking through it the other day, and as we're getting ready for this, and I'll just tell you what it is, but there's an episode of Chuck that I really like that's like this close to being a bottle episode, and I actually thought it was for a while. It's called Chuck versus the Murder, and it's a murder mystery using one of the sets of that they have for Castle, and so it's a set that they've had all season long. They have a couple extras in it that they bring in to have as a murder mystery, and so it's got like the three mains that are in there of having Chuck and
Hmm.
Casey and Sarah. They're kind of figuring out who was the one who killed someone in Castle, and then they like more people keep dying. And I really liked how they changed like the form and function of it. But then I remembered the episode also has a B plot that it does technically leave the set and they have to film because Big Mike gets captured, and then they film like a scene in Large Mart. And I'm like, well, that doesn't count. So I thought I'd bring it up just because I like that episode.
True. That episode is also one of the many blatant Subway references.
Oh god, yeah. Oh man, like every episode is that way. Every episode is a freaking Subway commercial once you get to season three.
Hmm.
But yeah, that show, as we've said before, goes a little downhill in quality. Season three it peaked, and season four and five were yeah. But this is one of those gems in season four that was pretty great. So we're gonna start off, Brian. Why don't you hit us with let's do it as top three. I know you've got like kind of a collection. I
Yeah.
put mine in the top three, so I'm stalling so that you can see what you think as is going to be your three. But
Yeah.
what would you say is number three in terms of best bottle episode?
Well, I guarantee that we're going to have some overlap because when we talked about this, there's two episodes that we both thought of right away. I'm going to say those for my top three. I'm going to go to Parks and Recreation. In the last season, there was an episode called Leslie and Ron.
I
You know
don't
this
have
one?
that on my list, but I'm familiar. I like as I was thinking through this, that was one that popped up in my brain. But I like it, but it's not on my list.
Although it might not technically be bottle ups because I think that at one point they do a flashback, but like 90% of the episode is Leslie and Ron have been fighting all season, and everyone else decides they need to put a stop to it. So they lock them into the parks department, and they say like, nope, you guys are going to be in here until the morning or until you work it out and stop fighting with each other. And it just goes through this whole spiel of them. Like Leslie's like covering Ron and post-it notes and trying to annoy him to talk, and she gets a whole whiteboard with the whole timeline and tries to like figure out what happens. And Ron whittles a key to his office and like manage to like lock himself in. And then at the end, like they manage to break down and realize that Ron was so upset because he was going to ask Leslie for a job within the National Parks Department, basically go further into government, which he hates, because he was lonely. Because over time, all of his friends, the crew in the Parks Department, started to go off and do their own things. They all followed their own passions, and he was being left alone. He said, "I looked up and I realized I didn't recognize anybody," and that rejection from Leslie, because they had a meeting and then Leslie forgot about it. Something came up, and that's when he was mad about that, and then he ended up being part of a construction deal that bulldozed Anne's house, which Leslie was mad about, even though Anne didn't even live there anymore. And it was like a perfect mix of like funny and sweet. And at the end, Ron's wearing a yellow jogging suit, playing saxophone, and everyone's like, "This is not what I expected."
This isn't how we left you guys.
Yeah,
Did they also, was that the episode that ended with Willie Nelson's buddy playing?
I I think that one might have ended in 2 episodes, because that one also was in the finale when Ron gets his job as like the overseer of the park.
That's right. That's when they play. I know that they bring it up how much Ron likes that song. I thought it was in that
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, because they say that everyone picked a song. I'm not going to pick your pick. I'm going to pick Jerry's pick, which was "We Didn't Start the Fire," which is like one of the most irritating. It's a good song, but it's so overplayed that it becomes irritating.
It is not. Fun fact, I know all the words to We Didn't Start the Fire, as you might have guessed.
Dude, did you know that because of Dwight in the Fire episode of The Office, or before that?
I before that. And so like when they in How I Met Your Mother, when Marshall like is on a break with Lily, he dates like one or two people, and one of them is Monica Baccarin. And she is like this crazy, she's got like crazy eyes or so. But she knows all the lyrics to We Didn't Start the Fire, and they walk into the apartment and like they play it like that was so embarrassing that she just did all the lyrics as they're walking there. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was cool that I knew all these, but apparently people find that crazy and weird. I also know all the
Monica,
lyrics to One Week by Bare Naked Ladies.
I know some of those. That definitely suits you.
Thank you. Yep. I learned these things. So
So Monica
you're welcome.
Baccarin, isn't she the what's her name from Firefly?
She is, and that leads me into what was going to be my number three. But then, as I like was thinking about it, so I also looked and checked on some other lists of like, oh, what does the internet say? What are some of their top bottle episodes? And they have this episode. One of the episodes that I had you watch was Out of Gas from Firefly, and that is pretty
Yeah,
close to a bottle episode because it all takes place on this ship. But I realized there's one scene when they're recruiting Adam Baldwin's character that takes place off ship, and there's a couple characters that they have also in that. So I'm gonna substitute that because we've already talked about that.
they also have the original mechanic when they recruited Kaylee, who was a
Yeah,
guest star.
yeah, and then they run in trouble with like another ship too, and so
Oh,
and
that's
then the
right.
guy
Yeah,
that sells them the ship too. So I'm gonna go with like the truest pure to form example of a bottle episode that I can think of, and that is Friends from season three, the one where no one's ready. And
yep, it's on my list. So we'll have more time to talk about this one.
it's a pretty good episode. I think that it's one of those that like I said, it really exemplifies what a bottle episode should be. There's no
Mm,
flash. There's none of these gimmicks that you can do of like stunt casting or cool locations or any big plot device things.
yeah,
It is just pure and simple, all within and it's also all within one time frame. Like the time frame that you see of the episode is a 20-minute time frame because they're all
yeah,
getting ready for this event that Ross is a special keynote speaker or something like
yeah.
that. He's a special honored guest at, and he wants to impress his bosses at the museum by having all of his friends there, and they all want to be on time. And so he's like so neurotic about we have to get there on time. And like as the episode suggests, no one's ready. They all have one thing going on for one reason
Yeah.
or another. The episode or the part of the episode that I really like the most is with Joey and Chandler when they're fighting over a chair. Chandler
Yeah.
gets up from the chair, goes to the bathroom. Joey sits in the chair while he's in the bathroom. Chandler comes out. It's stupid and pointless, but we've all had fights like this. He comes out. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, I was sitting in that chair. And Joey's like, you got up. And he's like, well, I was the last one there and I was coming back to it. You knew I was in the bathroom. So that it results in this huge fight and ends up where like it keeps escalating. So when Chandler goes to change in his apartment and comes back, Joey tags out. He's going to go change in the apartment as well and comes back. And he comes back in. He's not changed because he can't find any of his underwear because Chandler hid his underwear. So Joey does this whole, well, if you're going to hide my clothes, I'm going to do the opposite to you.
Opposite to you.
And then Chandler's like, what does that mean? You're going to show me my clothes? So Joey goes in there, comes out, and he's wearing all of Chandler's clothes over him. And because he didn't have any underwear, he's like, I'm wearing all your clothes with no underwear. And so then he starts doing like squat thrusts and stuff and like being disgusting. And I just love that whole part of the episode.
Yeah.
The episode.
Which you think about it, that would really only be gross for the bottom layer.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's gross enough. Gross, sweaty Joey who just drank fat earlier. He's wearing your clothes. This episode really speaks to the quality of the casting. That's what it comes back to, is that some shows are good because of the storylines they have. Others, you just see the relationships of the characters. You see them in a natural, normal environment, and that's where a good bottle episode will really shine. So.
I think about that they don't even go to Joey and Chandler's apartment, which I think they could have gone there and still had a bottle episode because Joey and Chandler's apartment is a stable set they have all the time. Mm-hmm. I think that would have still fit the definition, but they don't even do that. They just stick within Monica and Rachel's apartment. And I don't even think when Monica goes to her bedroom, I don't think we see her in the bedroom. I think we just hear her and she comes back out. Same
with Rachel and Phoebe when they go in there.
Yeah. I will say the only exception is the end tag of the show. It does show them at the event, and there's that guest actor because he came and sat down to talk to Ross, and then Chandler's like, I was sitting there. So like it's like a 30-second technical break at the end, but yeah, it's a bottle episode.
Yeah. I mean, still also another quintessential one where it keeps calling itself bottle episode that we're probably going to talk about also outside of the room that we're talking about. So I mean, there's always wiggle room. It's just as cheap as they can get it, but.
All right. At least that one, there was no extra casting, unless you count the Dean's voice, because the Dean was not a regular then.
Oh, sure.
I mean, what show are we talking about? There's not a lot of shows with a Dean.
I don't know what you're talking about. Is that your number 2? Or is that your number 1?
It's probably my number 1. Yeah, clearly we're talking about the Dean from the College's Appointments world.
That's obviously where we're going with this. All right, give me your number 2. We aren't foreshadowing at all.
One episode that's very polarizing. People either love it or hate it. And one of our guests, Paul, just because of his contradictory nature, of course he loves it. It's called The Fly. It's in Breaking Bad. So The Fly, at this point, Jesse and Walt are working for Gus's meth lab, his like big high-tech one, and there's a fly. And Walter is like Mr. Perfectionist. It's going to contaminate everything, so they have to stop what they're doing, and they basically spend the entire episode trying to search for and kill this fly. And I didn't actually get a chance to watch it in preparation. I was busy today, but I think it ends up being one of those things where they end up sharing stories and kind of getting to know each other while the whole episode is just them and a fly.
Yeah. And it's a great piece of character work, but that's the reason why it's so polarizing, I think, is because nothing of consequence happens that moves the story forward. And it's fine to have episodes like that. I mean, we call them filler episodes, but this really wasn't a filler episode because it really gave good insight into Walt. And like the whole idea of the fly is that the fly was a metaphor for just that that evil that has stuck onto Walt that is like he can't get rid of. That up until now, maybe not up until now, but he keeps compromising his humanity, and up until a certain point he thinks, well, I can compromise a little bit but still keep myself grounded, and I can still not enter fully into this world. And just the more and more choices he makes, the deeper he gets into that world. And you even see him talking about with Jesse, they have a conversation, and I don't remember exactly where they land in the conversation, but I remember that they have a conversation about how Jesse's, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. His former girlfriend that she died, how she died, and like they're talking about that and they're bonding over it. And there's just this unsaid thing of like, Walt knows he let her die and he could have stopped it. And it's really emotionally stirring, I remember, and just like great acting. I wanted to watch that episode again as well. It's not on my list, but I did want to bring it up because Paul was on our show for the last 2 weeks, and he brought it up himself, and we're like, I have to bring this up if we're talking about bottle episodes. But you
Well, he
do.
wasn't on last week. He was in the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I don't know, yeah, the character development in these shows is really great. I'm still working through Breaking Bad. Actually, I have it on TV right now. I'm in the second season, and one thing that I keep thinking of is like, I've seen Breaking Bad. I know that Jimmy becomes Saul Goodman, and the only cast member, a main cast member who's still around is Mike. So I'm thinking, what is going to happen with all the rest of these cast members who are going to be out of his life by the end of the series? And I just that's the part that makes it interesting for me because they kind of go into this bringing in new characters, knowing that by the end of the show they all have to be gone because they're not in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Better Call Saul. I'm so excited for its final season to see how that ends, and then to be able to compare the two in their full encapsulated versions. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. I'm the that I'm thinking Better Call Saul might end up being my favorite over Breaking Bad, and that's crazy because Breaking Bad is so good, guys. If you haven't watched these shows, do yourself a favor. Breaking Bad is awesome. Start that, and then get into Better Call Saul.
Yeah, you know what got me into Breaking Bad was actually at Christmas, my uncle and my cousin, and these are guys I never would have expected, especially my uncle. I never would have expected him to be a Breaking Bad fan. I had always heard of the show, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll get around to it. He was telling me like, no, this show is going to be like your number one favorite. It's like the best show I've ever seen. I'm like, oh wow. So you, who I don't think ever watches these kinds of shows, watches this show. Okay, I gotta check this out now. So my uncle Al got me into that show.
There you go. Well done, Al. You did it. All right. My number two is the one I alluded to earlier that has a special guest star, but I think they countered it by only having, so it has two of the main cast and this guest star, and that's really the entirety of this episode, and it all takes place in one room except for an opening stinger and a closing stinger. So the episode is called The Box from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I believe it was even following a Super Bowl that this was an episode that it aired, but it was a special guest star of Sterling K. Brown when he played a dentist that Jake and Captain Holt, Jake specifically knew that Sterling Brown killed this man, but they didn't have any hard evidence. They had the motive. They had like a flimsy alibi that they knew wasn't going to hold any weight, but they didn't have evidence that they could stick on him. So it's pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
if we get a confession out of this guy, we've got him. But without that, he might walk for a murder that we know he did it. And so, like I said, it's really only Peralta, Holt, and Brown throughout the whole episode. Gina has one or two lines at the very beginning, and then you see Boyle for like 1 second at the end. And so, between the two of them, it's a great dynamic that they have because it's it's the relationship that Holt and Peralta have, where it's by this point in the series, Holt trusts Peralta a lot, but there's still, because of how dynamically different they are, they also have different ways of doing things. And just because Holt trusts Peralta doesn't mean that he would specifically trust the way he would do the things that he would do to get the results that he needs. So as they're both in there, because Holt canceled this trip to the opera he had with Kevin, and he's like, I love being able to bust a criminal. And he looked through the case file. I was like, oh no, you're right, he did this. We need to get this out of him. And he was like so excited to be there. And you got a little bit of that silliness that Holt sometimes gets into that you just don't expect at all, of how
Yeah.
excited he is to do this. And so they're in there, and just their tactics that they use are so true to character, and they're funny and they're great. And there's also some of it that's like, oh, I think that you would see a version
Mm-hmm.
of this in an interrogation, in an actual police interrogation. Obviously it's comicalized, if that's a word, and
Yeah.
it's exaggerated. But there's this one thing that you're definitely not going to see, where Peralta's like, I'm running out of ideas, I've got an idea how to break him. And he just goes in there, sits on the table, and he has a guitar, and he starts strumming these off chords. He goes, ah! He's like, he just starts screaming song at him. And like Sterling Brown is just like staring him down. And the whole episode is really great. It's good tension for a comedy, of course. And it's a lot of fun. And it's so neat because it is all within that one room and it's so engaging the conversation. I'm a sucker for those sorts of things, like the movie 12 Angry Men or the play. I love
Mhm.
like tightly written dialogue that
Yeah.
keeps you intrigued, even though there's, like I said, there's not the gimmick of let's go somewhere else or let's move in the fast pace to something else. So really well done on this episode.
Yeah, I agree. I like dialogue. I haven't really talked much because I've only seen little bits and pieces of that episode. I never actually saw the full thing. I still haven't watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine all the way from start to finish, but
Really?
I do remember that being a good one. Yeah, I guess I got into it a little bit later, and it was I don't have it on DVD, and it's not streaming anywhere for free that I know of.
It's on Hulu if you have Hulu.
I don't have Hulu.
Well, then you're not going to watch it, are you?
I will eventually watch through it. I've seen a lot. For a while, we were saving it on a DVR and watched a bunch of it. But yeah, I still have some gaps. But I know enough to like know who all the characters are and everything.
Yeah, so great episode. Again, if you haven't seen it, get a chance. Even if you don't, like, I don't think this really gives away too much of plot stuff for any thorough storyline for anything
Yeah,
else. I say if you have only like seen little bits and pieces or never even seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine, this is a great episode just to check out, just to see if you like that kind of humor and that style. It's really well done.
yeah. My number one pick is obviously the one that probably the other main example of a bottle episode besides the Friends one, which is cooperative calligraphy in season 2 of Community. And the only context you really need to know going into this is just real quick. There was a secret trampoline run by a racist guy, and then Pierce got double bounced, and he flew into a garbage can, and that's why he's in a wheelchair with 2 broken legs.
Yep.
So, yeah. Other than that, so they're all in the study room, and they're making a diorama. And if you look closely, in the very beginning of the episode, you have to know to look for it because it's like a split second, and it definitely drives the whole rest of the episode. You can see a tiny monkey paw reaching up on the table, grabbing a pink pen, and disappearing underneath. And it's a cool little detail because the whole episode becomes Annie notices that her pen is missing, and no one has left or come into the room since. And she knows she had it. She even has a picture of her. It's like, look, this is I took a picture of the diorama, and my pen's next to it. And she keeps saying, "You guys keep stealing my pens," and so it ends now. And they get to the point where Abed and then Jeff even just yells, "We're doing a bottle episode," and then they lock the doors and everyone's in, and it just is a whole search and seizure for getting this pen back. They search everyone's bags. They even end up flip tables and have them get down to their underwear. And Abed's like, "Shake enough to dislodge," and they're all just wiggling around. And the dialogue that goes back and forth, like they have a lot of information that comes out in this one. This is when you find out that Shirley might be pregnant because of they find a pregnancy test in her bag, and I forget what else comes out when they're doing the searches.
Um, Before we get into that, I want to say
Yeah,
that they doing that. I love this idea where it's like the secrets that have been existing among a group of friends or people in close proximity, they start to come out and it like piles up. Like How I Met Your Mother did a really good one with this of the glass breaking
oh
episode
yeah,
where they're all realizing these things about themselves. I love whenever a show does that, and this episode really did that. And there is one where like they find out that Abed had been tracking in a
yeah,
chart all of the women's cycles, and they're like so upset at him, and it's like, why were you doing this? He's like, well, I realized that you were acting different at certain times. I started to chart that and to see because I don't pick up on social cues very well. And by the time that I realized what I was doing, that it was
yeah,
too late, and I found that it actually helped benefit me. And so
yeah.
then
I think
Annie gets so upset at that, and she's like, I can't believe you do that. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, chocolate. Oh yeah. She's like, wait a second.
I like that Abed didn't intend to do that. He started doing it by accident,
Yeah.
and then was it Troy said something like, "Man, you are awesome."
And that is exactly how Abed would do it, and how he had to do it so that you wouldn't be like, ooh, Abed's a creep.
Yeah, exactly. And then they even pry off Pierce's cast. They find like TV remotes and Slim Jims that he jammed in there to itch his legs. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know how they got Chevy Chase to do that. Maybe just because I don't he loves physical humor, but they got him to lay like almost naked in a wheelchair with casts on his legs. Like
I don't know. Yeah, this episode is one of those other like quintessential bottle episodes, just because for the first half of the episode, Abed keeps bringing mention of it. It's like, oh, this is a bottle episode, and they're like, no, it's not. Abed, what are you talking about? And just like the more that it happens, until like you said, there's that line where Jeff, because he has to get to a date, where Jeff calls like this woman he's dating is like, I guess I'm not coming to the date. I'm doing a bottle episode. Like, I just love them drawing attention to it,
Yeah,
and then it actually becoming a really good episode version, or I'm sorry, a good example
yeah.
of a bottle episode.
Jeff, his line is "Tell your disappointment to suck it." I'm doing a bottle episode. My theory that I've heard that I think it matches up is that this is around the time when we find out later that Jeff and Britta have been sleeping together secretly. And so if you look at it, Jeff is kind of talking on the phone, but he's doing it quickly, and it doesn't seem like he dialed a real number. So I think he just did that to tell Britta, like, nope, we're going to do the bottle episode. We're not going to sleep together, without telling the rest of the group that that's what he was telling. So he pretended he was on a phone call.
Yeah.
And because I think it's later in the episode when during I forget what episode it is, but Abed just reveals, oh yeah, they've been sleeping together.
Yeah. I don't remember which one that is, but yeah, I do remember that moment, and then it does like the flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would probably, if I was making a true top three list, I think this would have been number two, and I would have knocked off
Sure.
that one Friends episode. I knew you were going to bring it up, so I'm like, I don't want us to have the Friends one. You easily could have or could not have. I just knew this
Yeah.
one was going to be on your list. There's no way it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So I didn't get a chance to rewatch this episode, but I think it qualifies because I think it's just the regular cast and just the regular sets. I know that they do go outside of the building for this, but I think that still counts as part of the regular set.
Yeah.
And that would be safety training from The Office season.
I was going to say, I know in the office there's got to be a number of ones that count, because I mean there's got to be a lot of episodes where they just are just in the office. I think that one counts.
I looked up online just the synopsis just to remind myself to see if they go anywhere else or if there's other members that they get. They get like some of the warehouse guys as like guests. You know, they're not
Mm-hmm.
really in the main cast. They're more like recurring characters, but that's the extent of it. But anyway, this is a tremendous episode, one of the best of season 3,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
Michael gets in trouble for he was messing around in the warehouse again, and because of what he did. And I think this was the one where he like pulled the ladder out from Daryl, and
Yep.
Daryl broke his leg, and then corporate was like, well, we need to make sure everyone does safety training again so that stuff like this doesn't happen. Because how often does Michael be the one that triggers like corporate making everyone do something, right?
You think after a while David Wallace would be like, it's just Michael. It's just
HR, trust me, we don't need to do this. It's the Scranton brand. We don't need to talk about business ethics with everyone. It's just the one brand.
Yeah, Utica's fine.
Yeah. So, you know, of course, they're doing they start the episode in the warehouse where there actually is chances of physical danger. And so, you know, Daryl's doing his whole thing and like just making sure and Daryl, of course, knows that it's Michael Scott, that he's the problem.
Yeah.
So he's like, keeps calling him out. It's like, Mike, what did I say? Who can use the baler, Mike? I can use the baler.
Yeah.
No one should be using the baler. And they're like, everyone's against Michael. Like, Michael, come on. Like, you pay attention.
Only under the rarest of circumstances. There is no circumstance where you should use the baler. And then that comes back on Michael's last day. He's like, well, Daryl said I could use the baler. Nope. Like,
I love that he really wants to use it. He's like such a kid. But that's not even the best part of the episode, because like then they go upstairs and then they have to do the safety training for in the office, and the warehouse guys come up. And of course, because it's in the office, that it's not new, and because it's of course Toby as well.
Yeah.
Toby's not a dynamic speaker to begin with, and he's just kind of reading the rule book of like all of this stupid stuff of like, you know, if you're sitting for 45 minutes, take a break so that you 15 minutes to circulate and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, Michael's like, this is so boring. Everyone liked the warehouse's presentation better than our presentation. We've got to do something about that. So he schemes with Dwight to do this safety demonstration. So they get that where Michael is going to jump off of the roof. He's going to be talking about like suicide, because Pam was the one I think that gave him the stupid idea of like, well, theirs was more interesting because theirs had visuals. And he's like, you're right,
Yeah.
ours needs visuals. So I need to talk about depression and what that can do and bring a visual to that. So he has this huge performance planned out. He's going to jump on a trampoline, but that doesn't work. So then instead they get a bouncy castle, and he's going to jump off the roof onto the bouncy castle. And then they realize what's going on. And Jim's like, he's going to kill himself, pretending to kill himself. So then they actually have to appeal to Michael and talk him down from a pretend suicide attempt that would end in suicide. And like the layers of that are just so hilarious, because it quickly turns from like, oh, this is just so stupid, where he's like yelling, Dwight, you ignorant slut. And like, that's one of my favorite lines of the series, even though they borrowed it from Saturday Night Live.
Well, that's the whole joke, is that Michael gets all his humor from other places.
Yeah. And then like that Daryl has to be the one to talk him down, and it's like, man, you do have a tough job. And it's like, if I had to wake up as you every day, like I couldn't do it. I couldn't be you. Yeah. Like, he's trying to struggle to find a way to talk him down because he has so little respect for him, and yet he's able to do it. And the fact that also this episode contains the thorough line of Andy coming back and getting shunned by Dwight the whole time, and the other side of it where they're betting on everything, and Karen just keeps getting swamped in every single, and like realizes doesn't know this office nearly as well as she thinks he does. And there's a lot of other funny things that go along with like what people are betting on, like Creed biting into a potato and not noticing, or Kelly explaining Netflix. It's just every storyline of this episode hits. And a review that I read said this episode packed more humor into 30 minutes than a lot of movies do into a full-length feature, and I totally agree.
I love the Kelly one, because Kevin's the one like moderating it. He's like, well, you get so much money because she mentioned 6 romantic comedies, and she said 12 times. And she mentioned Karen is also a guest cast, because Karen was never a regular. I think Andy was a regular when he came back, because at the beginning of season 3, both Karen and Andy were guest stars. And I believe Andy was made a guest star later in the season, but Karen never was. So Karen and the warehouse crew, even Daryl and Creed didn't become regulars till season 4. So Daryl, Creed, Karen, and the rest of the warehouse are all guest casts.
No, it still counts. Stop poking holes in it. It still counts. Get off my back.
That's all that I had. I was gonna say, and we could do an audible here, but like, I think there's got to be a New Girl episode that's a bottle episode, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Yeah, neither can I. Here we can.
The one you mentioned when we did the New Girl episode, the one where they're trying to hide the bag of meth, is close, because I think the reviewer and then the fake Daquan at the end would be the only guest stars.
Yeah. Yep, I think you're right on that one. Oh, this review okay. So I just looked it up real quick. This review for that episode specifically, background check, calls it a bottle episode. So
okay.
Yep, even though Coach has a scene where he gets in the car and he's out at that playground, and even though there's a couple other characters, this has the bones of a bottle episode. And we've talked about this episode before. It is my favorite New Girl episode. Everything about that episode is just the best. I love it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to have a bottle episode when you have a basic set where all the characters are at. Like in Friends, they have the apartment. In New Girl, they have the apartment. Community, they have the study table. Which, I mean, the study table is interesting because you think of it as that's where everything happens. But a lot of times it's just the beginning of the episode, and they set up the plot, and then they go from there. They may come to it here and there. But like, that's one of the few episodes that really just revolves all around the study table.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some where they spend a good amount of time at the study table, like Dungeons and Dragons episode, or the one where they're reading Pierce's will. That's a pretty good episode as well with Walter Goggins. But yeah, you're right. Like a lot of these, I was trying to think of some other ones because I know like you look at some sets on shows, like I watched all 10 seasons of Smallville, and there's
Mhm.
like every single season there's like 4 or 5 big sets that they have, but they're constantly
Yeah,
going from this place to this place to this place. And then the fact that like there's one season where they're like, okay, we're done with the Fortress of Solitude, we're going to get rid of it, and then they had to go back to it a few seasons later. Like they tore down the Fortress of Solitude set, and then they're like, no, wait, we need it back for this season. They had to come back to it and reset it back up. So sometimes that happens, but it's really those four comedies that were so prevalent 90s and before,
hmm
where you tended to have those bottle episodes because those were like actual physical sets in front of a live audience. And I think that's really
yeah,
where that idea came from,
yeah.
is being able to like, I don't want to put our set design through
Mhm.
another thing for this
Yeah,
episode. So we're just going to use these 3 or 4 that we always use, and we need to figure
yeah.
out a way around that, which makes sense.
Another good, yeah, another good example of that would be Cheers. I mean, they have the main bar. It's very rare they have. I don't think they even think they did a bottle episode because usually there's all kinds of random patrons in the bar, and they go other places here and there. But a lot of times the episodes are just at that bar set. But actually, now that I think about it, there may have one episode. I don't know if that was the whole episode where the whole gag was people keep going down to the basement, I think, to get a keg or something, and then they end up no one ever comes back up, and it's one of those murder mysteries, like what happens when you go down to the basement. So I haven't seen that episode in a long time. That may be a bottle episode,
Your murder
but
mystery just reminded me of another great battle episode that I'm pretty sure is one, except for they did have one guest actor in it. But from Boy Meets World, I love the one Halloween episode where
oh
it's like
yep,
in Sean's head, the murder mystery one,
and then there was Sean.
and then there is
Yes,
Sean.
yeah,
That was a great episode where it's, if you find out at the end it's in Sean's head, because it has to be. This episode starts with people dying, and
yeah.
this is not the sort of show that kills off cast members, especially as willy nilly as it did in that episode.
But
But
can I ruin your argument on that
you
quick?
can argue it. You can ruin it. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, well, there's Kenny, the kid who in detention gets killed right away. There's the creepy janitor. There's Jennifer Love Pfefferman, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, and then there's a couple scenes where the classroom is full of random students.
Yeah, but it's all within the same sets. Again, I've always
So
heard battle episodes as like sets versus
maybe
actors.
you're right. I also just like
So,
poking holes in your arguments because that's fun to do.
well, yeah, that's. I mean, of course, that's how we do it.
Yeah,
So that was a fun one. Hey, I had forgotten to say, if you had not watched, have you watched the Friends reunion on HBO Max?
I haven't. So I'm definitely not asking for someone to illegally give me their HBO Max password. But if anybody on this Zoom call wants to text it to me, I would be willing to watch it.
Who would that? I don't know if there's anyone around that would be able to do that. If you haven't watched that, there's one little thing that I saw in it that's really funny about the episode we talked about, because they did actually bring up the episode, the one where no one's ready, and apparently you might know this outside of this anyway. So there's one part of the episode where Chandler comes back from getting dressed and Joey's out of the chair, and Chandler and Joey both look at the chair and look at each other and then realize the chair's up for
Yeah,
grabs, and they race to it, and Joey jumps into the chair. Well, on one of the takes when he does that, he messes up his shoulder. He like dislocates his shoulder or something like that when he does that. And they had to stop filming for that episode. And that's why in the following episode, they like show that something happened to him, and
hmm
like you don't see it on camera because he had already messed up his shoulder by that point,
yeah,
and you hear him like fall and collapse, and then in the next episode in the next scene he's got his arm in a
yeah.
sling. It's because he actually hurt himself, and they had to wait for his arm to heal to go back to finish the bottle episode and get that completely done before
Yeah.
they aired it.
Yeah, there's a couple examples. Like there's an episode of season two of I think it's season 2 or 3 of 24, where Carlos Bernard, who plays Tony Almeida, in real life hurt his ankle playing basketball. I was like, well, this is all in one day, so they had to like write in an altercation that shows Tony rolling his ankle to explain why he's suddenly on crutches within the same day as the whole rest of the season.
Yeah,
And then you know the whole did you know about the whole thing about Carla and the Scrubs musical episode, right?
I might not. Tell me it.
So when they made the Scrubs musical episode, Carla had like really injured her back where she could like barely walk at all. So you notice that most of the episodes she's not in the opening Welcome to Sacred Heart number. And like there's one of the scenes she's sitting down in a chair. The only scene that she's really up and moving is her tango episode, her big dance number with Turk. They had to have filmed that that scene, that dance number, like 3 months after they filmed the rest of the episode, because Carla in real life, Jody Reyes, had to heal because she was just in so much pain anytime she had to pretend to walk, or
Oh
what
man.
pretend every time she had to walk.
Oh, that'd stink.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, there's your free trivia. Speaking of which, we've got some trivia that costs you money. So last week, I
yeah.
don't. All of
Send us
this.
money.
Yeah. Go ahead. We can give you our addresses. So last week, what was our trivia, Brian?
It was I talked about Grandpa Phil from Hey Arnold, and who did the voice of him? The voice of him was Dan Castellaneta, who's done a bunch of things. He was the Robot Devil in Futurama, but he's most known for being Homer Simpson and a bunch of other Simpsons characters on The Simpsons. And I think that's the kind of thing where, I mean, he's done a wide range of voices, but you get a role like Homer Simpson, which he's been doing for over 30 years, that's going to make your career.
He also, I believe, replaced Robin Williams as the voice of the genie for the second Aladdin movie and also the Aladdin TV show. However, they did get Robin Williams back for the third Aladdin movie, Prince of Thieves,
Yeah.
which wasn't that great. But
No.
actually, it's kind of fun because like we talked about, so a couple weeks ago we talked about Cogsworth from Beauty and the Beast, David Ogden Stiers, that he played another Disney villain and he was the bad
Yeah.
guy in Pocahontas. Well, Lumiere, Jerry Orbach, he was also a villain in another Disney movie, and he was the voice of the villain from Prince of Thieves. So both of those guys from Beauty and the Beast end up going on to be villains in other Disney properties.
Yeah, a lot of these voice actors pop in everything. I think I mentioned. Do you know offhand? Do you know the name Frank Welker?
That sounds familiar. I'll look it up.
Anytime, anytime you've heard an animal noise on anything, it's him. Like he's the voice of Nibbler in Futurama. He does a couple of real voices. Like he's been in every iteration of Scooby Doo going back to the original. He's been Fred, and he was Kermit in Muppet Babies. But yeah, like he's great at just random animal noises. That's him in like everything.
One of my top vocal guys is Jim Cummings, who plays his biggest character probably is Max from not Max Pete from
Pete.
like any of
Yeah,
the Disney Goofy like Goofy's buddy
yeah,
Pete. But he's so many different. He's also Winnie the Pooh. He's so many different Disney
yeah.
voices that you would just
Cat from
not
Cat Dog.
expect. There you go. The
Yeah,
snake from the original Jungle Book. He actually, so if you listen to the song "Be Prepared" from Lion King,
like
Jeremy Irons sings about 2/3 of that song, and then when he gets to the part where he's like, "Even," or no, not even,
you won't get a
you
sniff
won't get
without
a
me.
sniff without me. That's it. Where he like yells that. He must have shot his voice or something like that because he couldn't finish the song. Jim Cummings sings the rest of "Be Prepared." So if you listen, you hear that shift from Jeremy Irons after that line in
Hmm.
Jim Cummings.
You know, they mentioned that line has a little bit of Pete into it.
Well, that line was Jeremy Irons, and then after that line is all Jim
Oh,
Cummings.
okay.
But
So there's a lot of extra bonus trivia for you.
there's so much trivia there that we just want to brag. And all this is true because I know things and I don't always say the wrong trivia stuff. Shut up.
And
You suck.
and I don't know about you, Matt. I'm not looking anything up. Everything I've said is off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, me too. I was just oh, what did I do? Never mind. Anyway, so I'm tired. It has been a day. Today is Monday. We don't typically record on Mondays, and so my brain's all confabulated. That's a word.
Yeah.
Oh, what is the trivia that oh, got it. Okay. So we talked about the episode The Fly from Breaking Bad, and it was directed by a director who went on to do a lot of famous movies. In the last couple of years, he's had some really big Hollywood movies. And so which director directed not only The Fly, but also those movies that have been pretty big in the last couple of years?
Jim Henson.
Correct. The guy came back from the dead. All of these are like 20 years after, 30 years after he had died. And yeah, he's still. When did he die? Was it like 84?
For Jim Henson?
Yeah,
May 6th, 1990.
I was off by 6 years. I
Yeah.
thought I thought he was mid 80s and not late 80s, but I did know he died shortly before Christmas Carol, which
Yeah, because
was
Christmas Carol came out in 1992.
I was gonna say 92. You stole my
Yes.
I am really good, guys. I am crazy good at naming movie years when they come out. I think we've actually already done that on this podcast, but
Yeah.
I bring that up a lot.
Yeah. And I'm just a savant when it comes to everything Muppets, including years. So you give me a year in the last 50 years, I'll tell you it's like something that happened with it.
There you go. All right, 1998.
1998, there was Muppets Tonight was airing its last couple episodes. There's also a special called Elmo Palooza, which I didn't hate, even though I'm not a big fan of everything turning Elmo centric in the 90s. It had Jimmy Buffett singing with Kermit the Frog.
Well, you can't hate that. What song do they sing?
Caribbean Amphibian, which is a very underrated Kermit the Frog song.
Caribbean. I don't know why that just makes me laugh. All right. Well,
It
there
is
it
so
is.
catchy. Yeah.
If you guys don't like Muppets, you've come to the wrong podcast. All right. So you're going to get a little bit of that every single week. Our buddy Andrew, who's on a couple weeks ago, you said that I bring up Chuck all the time, even though I did this episode. It's got nothing on how much Brian brings up Muppets. So,
Well, I didn't bring up the other show that I often bring up that involves
and we're going to end
combat.
before you do. All right. Well, thank you again for sticking by with us. Thank you again. If you are new to the channel, new to our podcast I have a feeling that people are going to be watching that episode we did about The Office a couple weeks ago, because that was a really great episode. Check that out if you haven't. So if you're new, follow us on Twitter. We're at TV Guys 1, or follow us on Facebook, or you can email us. But who emails anymore, right?
Yeah.
So we won't even give you the email address.
No.
You also can follow each of us personally on Facebook, Matt Rodenberg, Brian Jones, and let us know what you think. Anyway, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.